host a discussion with Mr. Alexis Patelis, Chief Economic Advisor to the Prime Minister of Greece. Mr. Patelis, a great joy to have you with us. He will talk to us about Greece in the global investment map and the things we have achieved already and what we have in the pipeline. Good afternoon. Apologies, my throat is a bit hoarse and I will speak from the heart. I'd like to thank the organizing committee of this conference. Once again, we find ourselves here and I will talk to you about Greece and investments. When this government took office back in 2019, the biggest problem in the Greek economy has been the so-called investment gap. In other words, the fact that there haven't been enough investments in our country for quite some time, and as a result, we couldn't underpin financial growth the way we wanted it. Things were even worse given that domestic savings of our country have been negative. So in order to cover that gap, we had to have some money injected from abroad. The good news, FDIs for this year will reach a record high level, despite the global volatility, the energy crisis, the inflationary pressures, and the war in Ukraine, etc., etc. Of course, we're not at the point we want to be. The investment gap is big, and it will take many years for our country to bring these FDIs in order for our country to get to the right growth path. So, talking about the financial plan of our country, it was like a triangle. And let me make a comment about each of these sides. The first side was had to do with our fiscal mixture. Taxes were quite high in Greece, especially taxes on labor and capital, and that used to be a drawback for growth. So our first concern was to find this fiscal space and the opportunity needed, which has been given in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, always respecting fiscal orthodoxy. We have identified specific opportunities. The fact that unemployment dropped by 5% and the solidarity tax was annulled, the 15% flat tax on stock options and on capital, the related corporate tax decrease, and the drop of the dividend tax to 5% were significant interventions. And we did those things because they are multiplying. They have a multiplying effect on economy. And the reason why we have this extraordinary revenues is the fact that we're now enjoying the fruits of those interventions. We also made some other interventions about the Greeks of living abroad, the non-dom context, the family offices framework, the pensionary-specific system and schemes for those who are working abroad and coming to live in Greece. Now, the second side of this triangle had to do with reforms. Reforms are too many to enumerate in these few minutes. We have passed no less than 410 bills already. Last week, we voted for the bill tabled by the Ministry of Health reform field bill, showing that once again our government is still on the reform path, despite the fact that we're just a few months away from general elections. In terms of investments, our interventions have been critical, both in the energy field. For instance, we simplified the licensing processes for renewables in Greece, the offshore wind parks, interventions in terms of digitalization, a very important component of financial growth. And ahead of us, we have many projects in the pipeline, talking about green economy, digitalization. Many of these projects are being financed by the RRF, and they will be deployed in the coming years. Third side of the triangle, banks. Allow me to say that in 2019, our banking system was a factor of systemic instability because red loans used to be quite high. They represented almost half of the bank's portfolio, and of course there was no way of having a fiscal expansion when half of the loans remained non-performing. Thanks to the Hercules or Heracles scheme, banks were able to decrease the red loans now down to a single-digit figure, and step by step, the servicers, thanks also to the financial instruments provided to them, they're trying to bring them down even more. Banks, however, especially Alpha Bank and Piraeus Bank, availed themselves of the global conjuncture and were able to get money from the market. That was a very important thing because as a result it decreased the fear in the mind of many investors that some Greek systemic bank would go bankrupt. Another important intervention was the so-called second chance law. What was that? It was the first time that we built a comprehensive framework for restructuring private debt and the bankruptcy law in our system, in our country. We didn't have that in the past. That's why we now have the out-of-court settlement mechanism in the context of which one might find resort to if he or she has a debt towards the banks or the state, and he or she is able to restructure this debt. Our government is putting pressure on promoting such reforms even more. Currently, the Greek banking system is healthy, is robust, and it's time for the Financial Stability Fund to disinvest. Currently, it holds significant number of shares in Greek banks, but it's high time that competition rose in the Greek banking landscape, and in collaboration with the Bank of Greece, we are elaborating on how to lift regulatory barriers for fintechs offering loans and leverages and other interventions that could boost competition. Let me give an example. We have the IRIS system that belongs to Dias. It currently offers cheap direct payments as long as it is activated by both sides. These and other systems like that will be able to further increase online transactions in the future. Another set of inventions had to do with the ones in the labor market. In 2021, Minister Hatzidakis tabled bills. Minister Kerameus in the educational field, as you heard before by the Ambassador Chournis, they tried to reform the field a lot. Of course, we have a great goal to attain, the investment grade by 2023. Credit rating houses examine two things. A, if you have a steady decrease of your debt, of your sovereign debt. And let me say that the GDP to debt ratio in Greece will further decrease this year. From 2019 until 2023, the European Commission itself forecasts that our country will register the largest decrease of sovereign debt compared to any other EU member state. So this fiscal stability remains our compass. But in this context, it is important to accelerate our growth rate, of course, by means of investments, because this will add more to our financial or our fiscal stability. The second parameter, the second indicator that foreign houses follow has to do with reforms. In 2023, we're going to have dual elections. That's a big bet. It's a big bet both for the government to make it so far, and after the dual elections and registering a majority vote, this will emit a signal because there will be no political uncertainty, and a brand new tenure will show that our country is serious enough and wants to remain on the path of growth. Last but not least, in order also to set the next speaker in, there was a conference that took place in London last week, an amazing conference organized by the Athens Exchange in collaboration with Morgan Stanley. During this conference, we found out that there was no such thing as a decrease in the investment appetite by foreign investors, but there's actually a tangible shift in the way people perceive our country. For a long time, they used to ask us, how is Greece able to keep this? How is Greece able to sustain or to remain standing in a global environment of energy crisis, of warfare, etc.? Now, the most frequent question addressed to us is, how did Greece make it and remain stable in this conjuncture? And they mean both politically and financially. And what are the lessons learned, and what are the feedback we can provide others with after given that we've been through these turbulent times, and what are the lessons we can provide other countries with? I'm talking about countries which, for any reasons, they are currently facing difficulties. This is one of the most optimistic messages one could get. Of course, the job of this government is to keep on trying, to keep on attracting investments, and we hope that the FDI record registered this year won't be the last one, and we will have even more records broken in 2023 and 2024. Thank you very, very much.